Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Samantha and I make videos on intentional living, minimalism and personal finance. And today I'm going to share with you tips on how to get a job in social media. Now, I work full-time as the head of video at a very large parenting website in the UK. I've worked there for 6 years and I absolutely love my job. We are part of a much larger group of websites and we are owned by a multinational company. My key responsibility in my job is to create a video strategy for the company in order to reach a larger viewership and to continue growing our audience. I do manage a small team and I'm mainly the person who does the hiring when it comes to my team. I filter through the CVs, I do the interviews, but obviously the last say so comes from my boss, who I get on brilliantly with. We have an excellent relationship. In this video, I'll be talking about how to get a job in social media and not about how to become an influencer, because I'm not an influencer, so I'm not an expert in telling you how to go about creating a big enough audience that you can monetize yourself. I do have this channel, but it's a very small channel. It's got a small following. I love it, but I don't make money from this channel. I do have a larger channel called London City Girl. It's part of a very small social media company that I own. It's also called London City Girl. It's a website and it has other social media channels. I do make money from that business. However, it's not through the traditional influencer route. So we don't have sponsorships and things like that. So that's why I don't feel qualified to tell you how to become an influencer, but I can tell you how to get a job in social media because my full-time job and also my side hustle are both in that industry. So how I'm going to structure this video is that I'm going to talk about the various different roles in social media, and then I'm going to go into the tips as to how to go about getting a job in social media. So when it comes to the roles, there are broadly social media manager, content creator, community manager, data analyst, and sales manager. So a social media manager is responsible for overseeing the company's messaging and how it goes about building its brand and its audience. In smaller companies, the social media manager can wear several different hats. They could be in charge of marketing and also content creation. But in larger organizations, they kind of sit at the top of the tree and they will have a team underneath them. So in my company, for example, my boss would essentially be our social media manager. She's actually our chief editor and she has a content team that sits underneath her. She leads the strategy and she really is the one who guides the ship. So speaking of content, the next role that I'm going to talk about is content creator. That can cover a whole range of jobs. So for example, I'm also a content creator, but I specialize in video. The other people that I work with, they specialize in the written word and they will create articles on current events as well as evergreen articles that are great for search engine optimization. If you don't know what that is, search engine optimization means that you write articles or create content that will be picked up by search engines such as Google, and that gives your content the best chance of getting as many eyeballs to it as possible. Influencers are also content creators as well as doing a whole range of other jobs. If an influencer doesn't have a team, they will also be in charge of doing their marketing, liaising with brands, building their audience, and it actually takes a lot of savvy and know-how to build an audience around their cult of personality and to also be able to monetize the content that they're creating. I do think that influencers aren't given the respect that they deserve because what they do can actually be very difficult. It might look all glamorous on the outside, and I'm sure it is glamorous, but there's also a heavy toll that kind of workload and lifestyle takes on a person. Because of the nature of their jobs, they're always online, they're always trying to construct a narrative of their life, and they're always comparing themselves with their peers, and that does make it really difficult on their mental health, and that's something that's not mentioned enough. So I think if you are trying to be an influencer, just bear those things in mind. It's not as easy as it seems. It's a lot of fun, I'm sure. A lot of people seem to be having a lot of fun, but I also think that there's a very dark side to it as well. So the next job we're going to talk about is the job of the community manager, who is essentially the liaison between between the organization and the audience. So key responsibilities will include answering questions, monitoring comments, doing some copywriting, and creating newsletters. The next job is that of the data analyst. They will look at things such as user engagement, traffic sources, and they will also try and identify opportunities for search engine optimization. All these things will inform the strategies that the social media manager will come up with. And finally, we come to the social media sales manager. So on social media, you can monetize your content in several different ways. You can have direct sponsorship deals with brands. You can have brand takeovers. You can also have automated programmatic ads appearing on your content. So the sales manager will be responsible for all of that. They will have direct conversations with the clients. They will come up with ideas as to how the client and the organization can work together. They will work with the content team or the social media manager to brainstorm ideas and present it to the client. They'll also be the ones who sets up the automated ad campaigns. So that covers the kinds of jobs that are available in social media. So the first thing to do is to figure out where you want to specialize. Now, I think most people who are watching this video will be more interested in the content creation and creative side of things, which is great, but I should warn you that on the pay scale, that's at the lower end, unless obviously you're a huge influencer, but I'm just talking about normal run-of-the-mill jobs. Then you are not going to be paid very highly because it's the creative side of the industry is so competitive. However, you can still make a pretty good living as you become more and more senior, but if you're thinking about salary, just think about what an average journalist would earn. So my first and most obvious tip is to have a social media presence. Now, that doesn't mean to try and build up a huge following, because if you were doing that, you'd be going down the influencer route. What I mean is to have a clean and presentable feed across all your social media profiles. A hiring manager in this industry is definitely going to be looking at your LinkedIn and your Instagram at the very least. So make sure that they're all up to scratch. Feel free to post personal things, but also be aware of the types of things that you're posting. Don't put on anything that's controversial, so opinions that might divide people or pictures of you drunk and partying. Hiring managers will expect you to know that they're going to be looking at your profiles. So if you have those things posted, they will question your judgment and your responsibility. The next thing to do is to upskill yourself. Graphic design skills, Photoshop skills, and video editing skills are in high demand. Don't feel scared to learn them. There are free YouTube tutorials, lots of internet articles, and trial by error is also a great way to learn. That's exactly how I learned. I'll give you a little back history of how I got into my job. So at university, I studied law, but I always knew that I wanted to be in the creative field. At that point, social media wasn't as big as it is now. I wanted to get into the traditional media, but I just didn't know how to. There was no way for me to open any doors. So I thought, right, let me just upskill myself first, and then we can go from there. So I started to learn how to build websites. I used that knowledge to get myself a job at a digital agency. It wasn't as part of the creative team. I was a project manager, but I was exposed to lots of creatives. I figured out what kind of software they used and what kind of working practices they had, and I tried to soak up as much knowledge as possible. Then I took a couple of years out and I learned how to illustrate and I learned how to video edit, and you can see all the fruits of my labor on my main channel where I create illustrated videos. So that allowed me to get into the job that I have now. When I entered this job, I realized that when it came to picture editing and design aesthetic, I wasn't really that great. It wasn't something that came natural to me, so I started mimicking my colleagues, what they chose, obviously with their knowledge, and I always asked them to double check my work until I had gotten my skill set up to an acceptable level. So why I tell you all of this stuff is to let you know that learning never ends and to not feel intimidated at having to learn new things. It took me several years to get all the skills that I have now, and I'm still learning, and that's a very important approach to have in this industry because things are always changing, and as you become more and more senior, if you're not open to learning and being adaptable, then there's always always someone younger, hungrier, and cheaper behind you. My next tip is to not be too picky when you're first starting out. Take anything. Now, I know that's easy to say if you're not in a financial position to be able to take anything, and that's why the media is really populated by a certain class and type of person. It's not impossible, but it might take you longer. So when I say look for anything, so for example, if you have an aunt who has a business, ask if you can run and grow her social media accounts. That kind of thing is really relevant experience, and it would look really good on your CV. So if you can't afford to work anywhere for free, then try and find other avenues that will give you the experience that you need. My next tip is to have a working knowledge of all the main social media platforms. So Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. If you do manage to secure an interview for a social media role, then research what social media platforms that organization favors. And if you don't already have an account, then set one up and have a working knowledge of how it works so you can talk knowledgeably about it. My last tip is to follow best practices when it comes to finding a job. There are loads of resources online as to how to go about finding a job, and finding a job in social media is no different from finding a job in other industries. So, you've got the basics: turn up on time for the interview, be enthusiastic and professional, make sure your CV has no typos, etc., etc. There's a couple of pieces of advice that I do want to touch upon a little bit. The first one is a lot of people will tell you to make your CV stand out, and what they mean by that is not to go overboard with design, because hiring managers do tend to prefer standardized CV formats because it allows them to glance through it quickly and gather up the relevant information they need when they're shortlisting candidates. When people talk about making your CV stand out, they mean make it stand out through your experience. So if you've got all the multimedia skills we were talking about earlier, Photoshop, graphic design, etc., etc., make sure that you feature them really prominently. The second piece of advice that a lot of people will give you is they will tell you to network. I used to go to networking events at university, and they were such a soul-destroying experience because I had zero success. When it comes to networking, it does get easier as you become more and more senior. I have a network of colleagues that I could go to if I were looking for another job, but that certainly didn't happen at the beginning of my career. And if it doesn't happen for you, then don't feel sad about it. It's a lot to go to a networking event and expect somebody to take a chance on you, to help you, usher you into a job. It's just not realistic that people are going to take that time. Now, don't get me wrong, it has happened for people, it has worked for people, but it certainly didn't work for me, and I wouldn't advise putting too much stock into trying to network. Just build up your skills and go for it that way. I also think when it comes to networking that senior people really like to mentor people that they connect with somehow, people that remind them of themselves when they were younger. And if you don't fit that category, then there's nothing you can do about it. I found this job and all my jobs through advertised positions, but my husband, who recently got a new job, he's been working at his new job for a year now. When he was looking for a new job, I was so surprised at the number of offers that he got simply through his network. And it just goes to show you that different people have different experiences. And just because your experience might not match somebody else's, it doesn't mean that you should let it hold you back. You need to be pragmatic. You can't just rail against the unfairness of life. Be pragmatic. Focus on what you can do for yourself and go down the route that's going to be most effective. And with that, we come to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you gained a little bit of insight into getting a job in social media. And for anybody aspiring to get a job in social media, I wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.